good, family? Welcome to the movement. Welcome to the mission. Welcome to the place where truth don't get sugar-coated. And just so you know, it's a good day to be a soldier.
You know, I find that we as a people, both, of all cultures, have to have some identity with understanding of, how do we get to this place to where we have a problem with the 14th Amendment, right? And its interpretation, which allows so many illegal migrants access to gain citizenship to something that is supposed to be so, you know, prideful, right? Into this nation while they still having pride for the nations in which they are originally come from. And it, becomes a problem in the mindset of those who are in this nation, consider this nation home, while other people are still having an allegiance to another country. We have to get at this whole idea with regards to, the understanding of why white people are so prideful of this country, but the understanding of also why black people are so prideful of this country too. I think it's a shame that after how many years it's been on, after so long, we've attempted to get other races to come on our side, and they simply have not done so. They continue to align themselves with white people when now here it becomes an issue to where the black men and women are recognizing how important they are to this nation. You have the president of the United States recognizing how important black people have been into this nation. Is trying to get diluted in the form of racism when it's truly a form of culture. And that's black people and white people's culture. That's stemming from the United States Constitution. Everything that came after 1965 is new. And so we got to think about this whole idea. But I like to necessarily go to somebody that could give an older perspective than I can with regards to this whole issue. Because, and where did it go? Because, okay, I know where I'm at. Because if we don't get an understanding from an older generation, then, I feel like what I say would not even be considered. Because what I just think about right now is that America is waiting to get back the black person who they know. The black person who they know who was conservative thinking. In terms of being conservative thinking, that didn't want the government in their business and wanted to explore the full abilities of their freedoms. And here we are. We're gonna hear, somebody from an older generation talk about their experiences and what has been affected when it comes to this whole idea of white supremacy.
First, let me just say thank you. It is so wonderful having you here today. It is wonderful being honored with the John F. Morgan Sr. Distinguished Faculty Lecturer, and it is wonderful to be at Emory. I wanted to talk about white rage, and I know it sounds crazy, but let me talk about how a black woman got to white rage. And although it looks like it began with Ferguson, actually it began in February 1999 when a black man came home from a hard day's work. And he went home, got into his apartment, and realized there was no food. You know that when you come home, you worked hard, you look in the refrigerator, and the refrigerator's looking back at you. And there's that moment where he's like, oh, but he's in New York. And you know, New York, the city that never sleeps. So you know there's going to be food available. So he goes outside, he steps on his apartment, the porch, and whew, a car rolls up. 4 officers of the NYPD hop out, guns drawn. 41 bullets later, Amadou Diallo goes down. 19 of those bullets hit. Amadou Diallo was unarmed. He had committed no crime. There was no warrant out for his arrest. He was just a black man in the Bronx. Now, that is bad enough. But then I'm watching Ted Koppel's Nightline, and Mayor Rudy Giuliani is on. And Giuliani is just unrepentant. And Ted Koppel, as you know, is not a softball interviewer. And he is on Giuliani. He's like, Amadou, Amadou, Amadou. And Rudy's like, what? He barely says the man's name. What he does say, my policies are working. New York City is safer now than it has been in years. And he pulls out his little flip charts with the little graph showing crime going down. My policies are working. New York City is safer. And I'm thinking, it's not safer for Amadou. Safer for whom? And the policies that he's talking about, it's the broken windows policing policy. That broken windows policing policy basically hyper-polices black and brown neighborhoods, criminalizing black people, criminalizing brown people.
You know, I always go to the point to where my first point of reference to the harassment of black people in this country has to go back to the politicians. Politically, you know, politically, the police work for the politicians. The politicians are the ones who enact laws that would allow the police to operate in the way that they do, right? And this is a scenario to where you can clearly see that Mayor Rudy Giuliani, definitely is stating to how its policies are being affected and effective towards this whole idea with regards to somebody who wasn't doing anything wrong at all, and end up getting shot 41 times by the police. And sometimes you wonder and you think about why black people are so frustrated when it comes to the police, right? Not only that, but they drive a culture of leadership that ultimately leads to these certain type of issues, which gets a police officer, when they are under the color of law, whether it's state or federal, to act in the way that they do. So you have to look at leadership first. It's leadership which could draw the bridge between black people and white people, to stop all the domestic fighting that was going on in the 1960s, and prior to that, of course, and in so many ways, which I want to say leads up to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? Through the whole period of the 1960s is where, from a point of it being a picture from a world's view, that you see it a lot more. You get the understanding of it a lot more. It's not in the backwoods somewhere hiding, right? It's right there in front of everybody's face, to where black people decided to show the world how barbaric white America was towards it, right? When it just wanted to live, when black people just wanted to live up to the freedoms that was promised to it under the 14th Amendment, right? Under the whole idea of being free from slavery, right? Being able to not have government in their business, but yet and still, the government is still being in their business by manipulating through leadership, through politicians, the harassment that is coming from the police on the black community.
Walk, the cops are on you. Drop some litter on the ground, cops are on you. You're standing, cops are on you. You're walking, cops are on you. You are getting ready to step off the curb, cops are on you. That hyper policing is the policy that Mayor Rudy Giuliani said was working. And while he talked about it, he said, and my police force is the most restrained and best behaved in the United States. I'm in Kafka land right now. You know, where Gregor Samsa is this big cockroach, but everybody's acting like it's normal, right? You know, because I'm thinking, most restrained and best behaved, don't fire 41 bullets at an unarmed man. I know something is wrong, but I don't know how to name it. And you know, we have to name things in order to be able to face them, to be able to deal with them. And so I don't know what to call this thing. And I'm just going, ugh. But as a scholar, I keep writing, I keep researching, I keep thinking, I keep teaching, I keep writing, I keep researching, I keep thinking. And then in August 2014, I'm in my home office and the TV is on. And I look up, and Ferguson is on fire. I mean, the flames are everywhere. And it didn't matter. I had the remote in my hand and I'm flipping the channels and it didn't matter. Let me see, my left hand. It didn't matter if I'm watching MSNBC. Yeah. CNN or Fox. Out this door. It didn't matter. And they all said the same thing. Look at black folks burning up where they live. Did you know that black people were burning up where they lived? Black folks are burning up where they live. What is wrong with black people? Burning up who burns up where they live? Because one of the things you begin to understand is that America needs the narrative of black pathology. You know, everything would be fine if only black folks would, right? We've heard this. And then you begin to fill in the blank. If only they would value education. If only they would not be thugs. If only they would. You fill in the blank in terms of that black pathology, because that is absolutely necessary in the narrative of America. And so there I'm watching MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, all with.
And you gotta believe that's correct, right? You know, Tupac was one of them individuals that was saying, man, I'm only giving back to you what you've been feeding me. And how he came up with this whole brand for Thug Life. And they do it, they do it even from a national standpoint, right? They just did it in Iran, to where Iran was terrorizing their own people, right? And while they're trying to create this whole idea of BRICS, right? Saddam Hussein did the same thing where they were trying to get away from the American dollar. And so did Gaddafi in Libya. He was trying to create a national currency for Africa that was backed by gold. And you see, there's always this reason to, right? If you give them that reason to in some form or fashion to, alienate you from, whether it's culture, whether it's um, leadership, whether it's in some form to they will use that to attack. And see, this is why you got to give it up to the ancestors, right, of the civil rights movement, because what the ancestors of the civil rights movement did was, like I said, they peacefully protested. That had been the best strategy for the world to see how barbaric the white man actually was. And I'm not saying that they not doing the same thing, because we see it today in Iran, right, where these individuals were terrorizing their own people. But it becomes much more significant when you have BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, Iran, and China. What has Donald Trump been doing, right? And I'm not trying to, you know, get off topic, right? I'm trying to stay on topic. What is Donald Trump been doing? He's been trying to destroy BRICS. What Iran did was start started to terrorize their own people, which made and pretty much being terrorists, right? And I'm not saying it wasn't a good idea to go into Iran, right? From a terrorist perspective, the Middle East needed for Iran to be put in check, basically, right? But what I am saying is that they use these certain type of issues with regards to Iran terrorizing their own people to destroy BRICS. They use the same kind of strategy on Gaddafi. They use the same kind of strategy on Saddam Hussein, right? All these individuals, and the only reason why America gets along with Saudi Arabia in the Middle East is because of the petrodollar, which is basically a trade of oil. All right, that is considered a currency, the petrodollar. But like I said, this is why you have to give it to the individuals that were a part of the civil rights movement. That's why you have to give it up to Dr. Martin Luther King's strategy when it comes to showing how barbaric um, white American actually are. So when white America attempts to draw an emphasis, right, and it's not we just talking openly. This is for white people to hear. This is for black people to hear. This is for Hispanics to hear, right? When white people talk so significantly at how civilized they are and how safe America is and how so many individuals want to come to this country with regards to being somewhere in like Mexico where the cartel is basically running everything and is the like how would you say the center ground for the cartels in all these other countries, right? And how the civilian population in Mexico want to come over here to the United States and seek refuge away from that. And how in most recent times this whole birthright citizenship idea has came up as the cartel is feeding the civilian population minds up that the United States pretty much is the place to be, and allowing them to, or telling them lies to get them to force and rush the border like they did under the Biden administration, right? While white people try to seem so civilized as a culture, the reality is they not. The reality is that um, white people have been some of the most barbaric people in this country, and it goes to shows a significance to that when it comes to the treatment of black people, its own people, who are because of the Revolutionary War, because of the you can go take it down to the Korean War. You can every war that the white man has got into himself into. Black people have been there on the side to fight with him, and it should be like, okay, We should be more brothers than anything in this nation. That's why the importance of the 14th Amendment is so important, because it's like, listen, we can't deny this no more. We can't deny the fact that black people should be a part of this nation because of all of what they have given to this country, right? They have no allegiance to Africa anymore. We've stripped them of that. We forced them into this. And we forced them in it to so long that they don't even know that place anymore. And we've won every war. We won every war except the Vietnam War, when we had a passionate black people to go to war with us. That's why I explain to them. I like to explain, like, listen, you talk about why we've tried to get Hispanics on our side, while we try to get the Asian community on our side, and they refused. They refused. They wanted to align with white people. When white people and black people get together on an issue, history shows we win. White people have to start to identify with this, because if you don't, you're going to have issues like you have in the Supreme Court right now, to where you begin to see that you're losing your country to foreigners, somebody who does not have allegiance to this country.
The same narrative of black pathology, this black rage they're talking about. Well, I'm sitting up there and I'm shaking my head. You know how you're shaking your head like, And then I realized I'm looking shoulder to shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. I'm shaking my head so hard. And I said, no, this is white rage. Ooh. This is white rage. I had lived in Missouri for 13 years. I saw the way that policy worked. I saw the way that policy systematically and systemically undermined African Americans' access to their citizenship rights. But as a nation, we were so focused in on the flames that we missed the kindling. That kindling. Let's talk about some of that kindling at Ferguson. Kindling. 67% of Ferguson's population is African American. In the 2013 municipal election, the black voter turnout rate was 6%. How do you turn 67% of the population into 6% of the voters? Those are numbers from Jim Crow, Alabama. You do it via a series of policies, the ways that you hold your elections, the ways that you craft your ballots. There's a whole series of tricks that you can use to change 67% into 6%. Kindling. Because you begin to think about what it means if you don't believe that you even have a say in who your representatives are. Kindling. Let's talk about the schools. Michael Brown's school system. Missouri rates its school systems. It accredits them on a 140-point scale. Graduation rates, matriculation rates, test scores, the whole 9 yards. And you can get a total of 140 points. How many points do you think Michael Brown's school system got? How many? On 140. 20. That's a good one, Eric. That's a good one. 20 out of 140, right? Anybody else? 10. Whoa. Aren't okay, I believe that's called cheating. 10 out of 140 points for 15 years. What that means then is that The public policy leadership was very comfortable with pulling an entire generation of black children through a school system that could garner no more than 10 points, an entire generation. And then start pulling another generation through, because we're at 15 points from K through 12. Kindling. Let's talk about the police. We know that the police are here to protect and serve. Yeah, because I'm going to be.
Before she move on, right? It is so important that we recognize the possibilities of our votes, right? What's going on right now with this whole voter ID thing, and where we as black people or the American citizen as a whole should recognize the importance of voting, whether it's local elections or the national elections, because how it goes to show on how the disbelief of your voice mattering in this nation, right? When you have the possibilities in terms of leadership. Now, not only to determine who the leaders of your surrounding area are going to be, whether it's locally or nationally, to hear their voices to dictate um, your voting experience so that you can put in a leader who is not trying to thwart on your success as a person. Um, it's important that you know do your studying, right? That you look at the laws that's being passed, look at the history, because look, when you look at a person like Joe Biden, ain't no way he should have been in office. Do you not know he was the person that writ up the three strikes law? He showed racism way before he came into office, and I think 30 years before he came into office. Even though the bill was signed by President Bill Clinton, Joe Biden is the one who actually writ that law up, which expands into mass incarceration. So it's so important to vote. It's so important to look at the history of the people that are trying to get elected and trying to be a leader in this nation. Because what has he done in most recent times? He allowed an open border policy, and through this open border policy, who has been most affected? These individuals are replacing black people in their neighborhoods, and it's only because it becomes so big that these individuals are starting to be replace white people as well. That see, in most majority white neighborhoods, you will find that they are accepting of illegal immigrants. Why? Because they feel like in terms of business that they have an opportunity to use these individuals for low wages. So they obviously want to accept them when there is a possibility for them to use these individuals, whether it's in hospitality, whether it's in whatever industry, under the table. All these immigrants are being used to a point for the economic benefit of the United States, and should show no allegiance to the United States, because they are being used by the United States they are being used for the economic benefits of the United States. They are being used for low wages and stuff like that. But it comes to a boiling point to where white people have to be able to look at their jobs, uh, their ability to have access to schools, their ability to ensure that the next generation of their kids have the same opportunities that they had, where it becomes a problem with all this illegal immigration, right? And this is how you get a guy like Donald Trump in the office when he talks about nationalism, and then afterwards you have a person like Joe Biden who wants to have an open border policies when he couldn't even identify with which American culture was. He couldn't identify what is the culture of America. The culture of America has to stem from titles. What are titles? Titles are jobs. Titles are doctors, lawyers, physicians. Um, I said physicians and doctors, but welders, electricians, construction workers, baristas. All these jobs that the immigrant is coming in and getting, it's knocking the white man out of culture, out of title, out of title to have a home and say, I am a doctor from the United States of America. I am a lawyer out of the United States of America. We are fighting for title right now when it comes to the whole idea of birthright citizenship. And with regards to the leadership, this is the reason why we need to understand who our politicians is, and we actually do need to recognize the importance of voting.
Doing this throughout because there's a kind of hymn book that we sing from, right? We know, right? We know the police are here to protect and serve. So in this protect and serve, except in Ferguson, they looked at that black population as revenue generators. So you're doing 26 and a 25, boom, ticket. I don't think you fully stopped at that stop sign. Boom, ticket. Looks like you've got a broken tail light. Boom, ticket. And this is a working class neighborhood. And so when you start hitting this neighborhood, this community with $50 tickets, $25 tickets, $80 tickets, $100 tickets, and you begin to think about what that means, you pay the ticket or you pay your rent. You pay the ticket or you keep food on the table. You keep the lights on. There's not disposable income here. When you don't pay that ticket, the next time you're doing 26 and a 25, because now there's a warrant out for your arrest. Then you are jailed. And then the entire criminal justice process of fines and court fees and bail are all pulling from this working class black community. By the time when Ferguson blew, those fines and those tickets accounted for 25% of Ferguson's operating budget. 25%. And let me be really clear. Justice was not blind. Justice, in fact, had, what did you call it? Had LASIX. Because justice was, so if the police would happen to stop somebody white and try to hand them a ticket and go, ooh, sorry, not you. Or if the police officer handed somebody white a ticket and somebody white went in to go then pay the ticket, it was like, what are you doing? I'm trying to pay this ticket. And to tear up the ticket. So you're getting this massive extraction from the working class black population in Ferguson. Kindling.
You know, you see this with the whole idea of the war on drugs. The war on drugs was, I like to contend to people as a business model, right? Because who did you have on the forefront of being the target of the war on drugs? Even though white people was dealing drugs, even though Hispanics were dealing drugs, you had all these different people that were dealing drugs. However, black people were seen as the primary drug dealer, the primary user, and somebody that had to be dealt with. Right? They took this whole idea and created a business model that creates the prison industrial complex. They took this whole idea, and not only that, they took that idea and stop black individuals, right, from being able to participate. And I still question, like, okay, if white people are the primary beneficiaries of the social programs, the welfare, the Social Security, and all these things, then why do we see a lot more white people in them households than you see, or excuse me, white men in their households than you see a black man? Was this whole idea of ridding the black men out of the household is the primary target of black men. Basically, was that same scenario not? Being subjected towards objectively towards the white man, because how do you get a distinct difference to where, if white people are being more likely to be on welfare, on social, all the social programs, because they was all meant for to benefit primarily white people, right? Then how do you get it to the point to where it's primarily the black man being stripped about of the household, being able to be fathers and things of that nature, right? So I just questioned that, um, because I'm glad that she draws up into the economy of how much uh, that town's budget was. 25% was with regards to tickets and all this other stuff, all coming from the black community with regards to police harassment, and all being dictated by the leadership of politicians.
And so, as I began to think about this kindling, I began to think about the way that white rage worked. White rage is not about visible violence. We often think of rage as visible. We often think of racism as this visible thing. But white rage is subtle, it is corrosive. It operates through the state legislatures, through Congress, through the judiciary, through school boards. It cloaks itself in legalities.
Like, they did not see this coming after with the passage of the 1965 Act. They did not see their nation being overrun, right? With so many illegal immigrants, or so many immigrants that didn't look like white people, that the country is not looking the same. They weren't expecting this to happen. While they seemingly said that they were trying to thwart white supremacy, captured the black vote by passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Speaking of Democrats, by the way, while Republicans had wrote that up, right, because black people were conservative, hardworking, um, entrepreneurial, right, wanted the government out of their business. Democrats say we gonna lock hold of them. Lyndon B. Johnson says we're gonna lock hold of them by passing this Civil Rights Act of 1964, while at the same time, months later, passing the Immigration Act of 1965. They did not see this coming to where they would be in a scenario today to where their white rage against black people is so subtle that it's taking all this time for the full fallout to actually play out, to where we are in the Supreme Court with regards to the understanding of the 14th Amendment.
And so I set out, and so because it's so quiet, it's so subtle, you don't see it. And so I set out to blow graphite onto that fingerprint, to be able to trace white rage throughout time, not all the way back to time immemorial with the dinosaurs, but at least up to the Civil War, all the way through to 2016. And one of the things that became clear to me as I started thinking through how white rage works, it became clear to me that the presence of black people was not the trigger for white rage. There's that stunned, almost, what you talking about, Willis? Look. It is the presence of black people with ambition. The presence of black people with drive. The presence of black people with aspirations. The presence of black people who achieve. It's the presence of black people who refuse to accept their subjugation. The presence of black people who demand their rights. That's the trigger for white rage.
And it's amazing how the Democratic Party seeks to control us so much to where they always have access to our votes, and in having access to our votes seemingly want to look out for other people besides blacks. Blacks are primarily the last individuals who benefit from democratic policies for some odd reason. And this is why I get to the Immigration Act in 1965 being like retaliation. After giving us civil rights, you implement this bill, you implement this legislation that actually have us being, replacing this. This just not this did not just start, was what I'm trying to say. This started way long ago, right? To where in places like Los Angeles right now, I bring this up a lot, but black people are 40% of the homeless population because they're being replaced by immigrants. And I always saw this as a retaliation, and why even the Supreme Court right now is looking back at the Immigration Nationality Act when it comes to how should they make a ruling on birthright citizenship, and how birthright citizenship in its intended purpose on the Trump side was meant for the children of slaves, because they are trying to save their country, but they know that, you know, they have done so much to the black community to where, you know, they have got to wake us up. They have got to wake us up to, the black people that they know, to regenerate, to say, listen, we gonna allow you to come in, to a point that we not gonna allow the Republican Party the Democratic Party to destroy this nation. We have always been on your side. We didn't like how you went with the Democratic Party for so long, but you are the key to save this nation. Just like you've been doing for such a long time in this country, with the Revolutionary War, with the civil rights, with the Civil War, right? You are such a key mechanism to helping us win that we got to go back to look at the 14th Amendment, because it opens the door for so many people, for us to get abused, for us to lose a country that we as a people, meaning white people and black people, have fought so hard for. So what did the 14th Amendment actually say when it was ratified in 1868? So it granted the formerly enslaved people citizenship, but it also had a clause with regards to subject of the jurisdiction, and that clause created a Pacific overrides to the Dred Scott case, right? The Dred Scott case versus the Sanford decision to ensure formerly enslaved people and black people in general, right, were deemed citizens. But the whole idea with regards to subject of the jurisdiction has to do with full allegiance and permanent domicile, which could be easily stated as domicile. You don't need permanent to pretty much define what a domicile is, because domicile means permanent residency. And so when you initiate, now you can be a naturalized citizen, but you have to earn that. You have to submit an application with regards to that. But black people, you don't need that. You can tell from your last name. You can establish from your last name that you are a citizen in this nation. My last name, I can tell. I can show I'm French. Out them French quarters. Even though I reside in the city of Los Angeles now, because black people migrated up out the South, but yet and still, it is important that white people recognize the importance of black people being in this nation, but it's also important that black people understand the culture that they come from. And that is people who wanted full access to all opportunities in this country. and wanted that to be, open to full possibilities outside of the farm. So while they sit here and they call this new holiday in Los Angeles Farm Day, how could you not recognize Black people? Why do you give it to the Hispanic primarily when it was only the Black people? The fact that the Black people didn't want to work on farms anymore, that allows the illegal immigrant to come through and take over those jobs.
This society has therefore punished Black resilience and Black resolve. Now, at this point, this sounds like almost Scooby-Doo-ish, right? Because we know it's so counterintuitive, because we think of the U.S., America, as the land of opportunity, right? And so all you've got to do is work hard, yes. And I'm telling you, y'all know the hymn, right? So my baritone's here. Right? We know the hymn. We don't even have to pull out the book. It is in the ether. It's in the cultural language that we understand how this nation works. But so what happens if you have a series of policies that in fact punish Black achievement, Black aspiration? And it sounds counterintuitive, but how else can you explain how government after government after government has worked so hard to see to it that Black children do not get a quality education? Let me give you a couple of examples. In 1947, in Prince Edward County, Virginia, the school board finally agreed to build a high school for the Black children. Because remember, this is a completely segregated system, Jim Crowed. And so in 47, that would be after the U.S. helped defeat the Nazis. I need to put that in its time frame. Then we get a high school for Black children in Prince Edward County. Within a few years, that school is bursting at the seams. 2 to 3 times as many children are in this space than that building can hold. And so the Black parents are going to the school board, the all-white school board, saying, we need an additional school. We've got kids bursting at the seam. It's doggone near impossible for them to learn sitting one on top of the other like that. We need a new building. The school board was like, no. And the parents are pushing hard, unrelenting, demanding education for their children. And the school board finally relented and put up 3 tar paper shacks and said, your kids can go there. Now, meanwhile, the white school is nice brick with indoor plumbing, which is not available in the Black high school. By this time we're in 1951. So there was a young woman, Barbara Johns, 17, and Barbara Johns was like, my name is the wrong one. You gonna take this? You gonna take this? No, you're not taking this. You gonna take this? Yeah, you're like, no, we're gonna walk on out of here, aren't we? And she starts organizing that school for a massive walkout, a massive demonstration, saying, we're not having this. We're not having it. They rose up and boom, hit the door. Administrators were like, what just happened here? And they were like, yeah, yeah. Now, she wasn't playing. And so the death threats started coming in on this 17-year-old child who was demanding quality education. It was so bad that her parents had to spirit her away to safety to Alabama. Boom, I rest my case. You know, when you got to go to Alabama for safety in 1951, woo, woo. Meanwhile, Prince Edward County becomes one of the school districts that's bundled into the Brown case. Now, when Brown came down, Prince Edward County said, oh, I got something real for you. And so what the town fathers, working with the state legislature, decided to do was to shut down the entire public school system. Because that way, if we've got to have equal schools, then black children and white children equally do not have access to a public school. And you can almost hear the "aren't I smart" written on them. Except, so black parents are like, what? But they're not listening to black parents. White parents are like, what? And they're like, oh, no, we got this. We're not going to let your white babies go uneducated. You know that. And so what they have done is that they have set up taxpayer-funded vouchers to pay for the tuition for white children to go to all white segregated private academies. So white children continue to be educated, and there is absolutely nothing for black children. Thousands upon thousands of black children. And it wasn't just in Prince Edward County. This was in areas throughout the South.
Sure, it's in areas in like Los Angeles as well. I ain't gonna, you know what I'm saying? Because I remember back when I was in junior high school. We had this pen pal program, right? And in this pen pal program, we were it was kind to bridge the gap between children, I guess, of other cultures, right? And then bridging that gap in between, a communications gap between people of other culture. And my pen pal was a young white girl, and I don't know what the school was called. But one day we decided to the school allowed a field trip so we can actually have the possibilities of seeing and finally meeting each other, right? And excuse me for freezing, and finally meeting each other, right? And when I went to this high school and saw the difference and was full of amazing and like, how is this school looking so much more different from my area, the school in which I come from? Why is it, that's the first thing I noticed, how everything just seemed so, guided towards making sure that kid was going to be successful. I never saw the child again, but I always allowed that to be my first recognition that what they say is true, that white people's schools are better than they receive the best in terms of a child's education than does white people. Does black people. And I noticed this in junior high school because you hear about it, but you don't actually see it. I was actually able to be present in it. And then as I go to high school, I saw the difference in between the white household and the black household, right? And it's not to say that there is truly like a cultural difference, but it's the difference in the idea of what a black person is supposed to look like and the idea of what a white person is supposed to look like in the idea of how black people are supposed to live and how white people are supposed to live, right? Now, it ain't to say that there ain't no poor white people. It ain't to say that, white people don't have similar struggles, but it is the separation, the divide of how 20 minutes you can be in Beverly Hills or South Central Los Angeles. And what is the difference between it? And, in my study, and I began to recognize the difference between it. And, it's not going to be a subject of conversation right now for this topic because I want to allow her to talk. However, I do understand what it is, right? However, the culture that she's talking about at this point in time, and what she's talking about, even a 17-year-old girl was not having it. You know, that is something that has been missing out the black culture, right? And it's not, I'm talking about from a majority's perspective, right? To where we're just not having it. Like, we taking pride in education. We taking pride in us being successful. We know that these people look at us a certain way. However, we not going to allow that to stop us from being successful, thriving, having the full appreciation of what this country promised us when they freed us from slavery, when they signed the legislation of the 14th Amendment, and we've consistently been fighting after that. Now you have people from other cultures, because of the Immigration Act in 1965, thinking that they come over here being better than us. When you having access to things that we didn't have access to, you didn't get redlined from housing. You got FHA loans. You got business loans because your credit was so good, because you didn't have a credit history. You didn't get caught up as the primary targets of the war on drugs, demeaning the social media. Demeaning not social media but media. You know what I'm saying? You didn't have to do the same suffering while we continuously told you guys to come our way. You didn't want to. You decided, no, we want to go over here because from a world's perspective, or from a country's perspective, here you guys look like the worst people ever. When you don't recognize the importance, like my grandma, for instance. All my brothers, I think, all my brothers are highly educated people. You know what I'm saying? You know, chess, you know, being all up in the newspapers and all that, you know, such a things, right? With regards to playing chess and having a good education and things like that, and, you know, well-read people. But there's more, you know, my teachers who strive for me to be excellent. There's more than us. Look at the black woman right now, who's the most educated person in the United States. And we're looking at a black woman right now. So it is only in a mindset to where, you know, white people have to fix in their own mindset, because it's destroying the nation. And that's pure plain blank. You wouldn't be fighting so hard right now in the Supreme Court to ensure that this 14th Amendment gets back into its wording with regards to just allowing black people to be considered citizens. How you have to go back and say, man, black people, stand up and fight with us again on this issue, because our subtle rage is about to take us both out.
And when these schools are shut down, Prince Edward County is shut down for 5 years. Begin to think about that. You're in the 5th grade. When your school opens up again, you're supposed to be in the 10th. Think about everything that you have lost in those precious 5 years. And this is at that moment where the U.S. economy is beginning to transform from a manufacturing-based economy to a technology-driven, knowledge-based economy. And we have all of these black children that the governments and the school boards have said will not be educated, period. What does this mean? Let me give you some sense of the power of white rage. So Brown won, and Let's see, law professor Robert Shapiro here. Brown 1, 1954, where separate but equal has no place in public education. Did I quote that right? Yes, okay. Brown 2, 1955. This is the implementation decision with all deliberate speed. 1956, 101 U.S. congressmen and senators dug in, signed the Southern Manifesto, vowing massive resistance to the Supreme Court decision. We will use every lever of power within our control to fight this thing. 1957. Radio signals pick up, beep, beep, beep. And you hear President Eisenhower going, dang, dang, dang. Because beep is Sputnik. The Soviets have launched a satellite into the air, into orbit, and it is a technological feat that the US did not believe that the Soviets could master. But it's more than that. The Soviets have their nuclear arsenal. But the US is thinking, yeah, but they don't know how to get over the Atlantic or the Pacific. We're good. So we'll have some forward bases for our allies in Europe and our allies in Asia, but we're good. Beep. Beep. And so the federal government does something that it hadn't done before. It pledges hundreds of millions of dollars into education to fund what they said would be the brain power to fight the Cold War. We need scientists and engineers to be able to counter, to outrun, to be able to outdo what the Soviets are mastering here. Now, this National Defense Education Act was huge, landmark, and it was being guided through Congress by 2 Alabamians. I think I just did spoiler alert. So their concern was, we want that money. You know, universities like the money. They like the money. And when the feds are putting up hundreds of millions of dollars to build labs and hire faculty and for postdocs, universities are like all on that. But Alabama was concerned because Alabama's not admitting black folk. Alabama has a whites-only admissions policy. And we got the law of the land saying, no, you can't do that. And so in this discussion with the Eisenhower administration, they're like, we will shepherd this bill through. We need to make sure that we do not have to abide by Brown. We need to make sure in financing the brain power for the Cold War that we get to maintain Jim Crow in our admissions policies. And the federal government said, yeah, we're cool with that. And so I'm thinking Jim Crow, nuclear annihilation. Nuclear annihilation. Nuclear annihilation. They're like, nah, son, Jim Crow. That's more important than being able to ensure that our citizens, our people, have the education that they need in this incredible, critical moment. That's white rage. Anybody see Hidden Figures? Yeah. Think about what that would mean if we had had that kind of investment then. And think about where we are now as we're trying to figure out how do we get more African Americans into STEM fields when we have systematically refused to invest in those schools even after Brown.
It's all there for you, right? She goes into so much, you know, with regards to this whole white race thing and how, you know what I'm saying, excuse me for saying that, but how white race has hurt this country. The whole idea with white supremacy, even in the times of, you know, a war. And now that you need, and look at the importance of the movie that she's talking about. I forgot what the movie was called. But look at the importance of those individuals who had the education as black people to go and assist. You know, just the inventions alone, man. It's just incredible. How would you continue to want to aspire towards the whole idea of white supremacy? And it goes full circle again right now when it comes to the Immigration Act of 1965, into the whole idea of Wong Kim Ark, and how we are in this country today talking about birthright citizenship, and how originally the take was to it, in which Donald Trump is trying to fight for again, is that subject to the jurisdiction is for people who have full allegiance to this country. And who does that include? That includes black people originally. So it just goes to show you how things run full circle. It goes to show you, for white people and black people, that, you know, white people want to inspire you to be the black people who in which they knew. Right? MAGA in today's times under the Trump administration does not mean the same thing that it meant under the Reagan administration. MAGA means under the Trump administration has to do with nationalism, which includes black people. America wants its culture back, and it doesn't necessarily mean a culture that dunks on black people, right? But absolutely kick those who are not supposed to be here out, but inspires every American citizen to be their best. They want the best in this country. So I inspire black people to dismiss white supremacy, because it means nothing. It only means something if you don't vote. It only means something if you go with the Democratic Party and continuously allow you to get replaced by the illegal immigrant. And white people is not going to stand up for that, because you know why? They calling on black people again. They looking towards black people again to help it determine what does full allegiance mean to this nation. Black people stand up. White people appreciate black people for what they have given to this country, so much so that once again you have to call on them again. Because when you look at the United States Constitution, that's all you see is a history of black people and white people. Tiny Cross-H.U.G on the Trumped Up Live Show. Always remember, man, to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It's a good day to be a soldier.
We are the essence of God's image. We are the representation of God's love for His creation.
Faith, facts, and fire. Tiny Cross-H.U.G style.